The GPS tracker cost $38. I ordered it at 1:30 in the morning, while Zoe slept quietly in the room above me, and it arrived in a bubble mailer 2 days later. I installed it on a Friday, early, tucked into the wheel well of her car, while she was in the shower. Magnetic base against cold steel, invisible unless you were specifically looking for it. The whole thing took less than a minute. I went back inside, made coffee, handed her a mug, when she came downstairs, and she kissed my cheek and told me she loved me. I said it back. I meant it. That's what makes the beginning so difficult to describe. I was still in it. Still hoping I was wrong. Still doing the math every morning in a way that came out even, because I needed it to. My name is Bram Sinclair. 33 years old. Commercial roofing contractor based out of San Antonio, Texas. I've been running my own company for 8 years. Built it from a 2-man crew and a leased truck into a 40-person operation, with contracts across Bexar County and into the Hill Country. I've been married to my wife Zoe for 7 years. We live in Alamo Heights, have a German Shepherd named Carver, who treats the couch like it belongs to him, and we had what I would have called, right up until October, a solid marriage. Not perfect. No marriage is. And I've never trusted anyone who claimed otherwise, but genuine, built on real things. Real history. Real years. Zoe had been managing the business finances for 3 years. It made practical sense when we set it up. I'm on job sites constantly, usually unreachable during peak hours, and the invoicing cycle doesn't wait. She had a background in accounting before she shifted into freelance design work, so the skills were already there. She handled payables, bank reconciliations, vendor relationships, payroll for the contractors. I trusted her, the way you trust the person you've chosen to build a life with. Completely. Without the kind of constant verification that would suggest you didn't. That's how these things work. You hand something over once, cleanly, with good reasoning, and then you don't look at it again, because looking at it would mean you don't trust. And you do trust. So you don't look. The disappearances started small. A Tuesday night in early October. Zoe waited until I was already settling in for the night. I'm up early for work, so my evenings run short, and around 10 p.m. she said she was restless, going to run to the gym. The gym we both had memberships at closed at 10. I didn't say that. I was half asleep, and I told myself I'd misheard the time she said she was leaving, or maybe there was a satellite location I didn't know about. She came home at midnight. I was asleep, or pretending to be. The same thing happened that Thursday. Then the following Tuesday. I asked her once, casually, sliding it into a conversation so it didn't seem like a question. She mentioned a newer location, open until 2, better equipment, fewer crowds. It sounded reasonable. Everything she said always sounded reasonable. That was one of the things I loved about Zoe. She had a clarity to her, an ease of explanation. Later I'd understand that this quality has a shadow side. I looked up the gym locations at 2 a.m. after she fell asleep. There was no new 24-hour location within any reasonable distance from our house. The nearest one was almost 20 miles out, which, at 10 p.m., was a strange choice, when the one 3 miles from us had only just closed. I didn't confront her. I told myself I'd wait. A week, 2 weeks, I'd see if it stopped. It didn't stop. 6 weeks in, on a Thursday night, I sat in the parking lot of a hardware store on the way home from a late site visit and watched the GPS app on my phone. Blue dot leaving our driveway at 10:22 p.m. Moving north on I-10. Merging onto 1604, 11 miles, 23 minutes. Stopping at an apartment complex on the northwest side of the city. The Ventana at Stone Oak. I'd done a re-roofing assessment on the commercial suites adjacent to it 2 years back. So I knew the development. The dot sat there for 2 hours and 47 minutes. Then it moved. Came home. I sat in that hardware store, parking lot, for another 40 minutes after the dot, settled back at our house, trying to decide what I was looking at, and whether there was any version of it that wasn't what it obviously was. My business partner, Forrest Dade, lived at the Ventana at Stone Oak. I knew this because I'd helped him move in. Second floor, Unit 214. I'd carried boxes up those stairs, and then we'd sat on his floor, eating pizza. and talking about the company's growth projections. Because that's what we always did. We talked about work even when we were supposed to be relaxing. Because the company was as much his as mine. And that kind of investment doesn't stay at the office. Forrest and I had been friends for 12 years. We met the first week of college orientation, both standing in the same confused cluster of new students outside the wrong building, both from small towns. Both in, over our heads in slightly different ways. We built B&D roofing together on a back porch in 2018, over a six-pack and a legal pad full of rough numbers. That turned out to be more accurate than either of us expected. He was the best man at my wedding. He gave a speech that made my aunt cry 3 separate times. He said I was the most loyal person he'd ever known. He said it like he meant it, because back then, or in the version I was living, he did. He'd stepped back from day-to-day operations the previous spring. Burnout, he said. Needed to decompress and reassess. Made complete sense. 8 years of building something takes a physical toll, and Forrest had always carried stress in ways that showed. Lost weight when a project ran over, went quiet when cash flow tightened. I told him to take whatever time he needed. He retained his equity stake. We still had lunch every few weeks. He was still around, just not every day. I sat with what I'd found on the GPS for 3 days. I didn't eat much, slept worse than I already had been. Went to job sites and functioned well enough that no one asked questions, which is its own kind of skill. Keeping the external surface steady, while the interior runs in a completely different direction. On the 4th day, my bank called. The account manager was a man named Mr. Davenport. I'd spoken to him twice before about the Riverside Commons project account, a $2.1 million commercial contract I'd signed 8 weeks earlier, and the largest single deal in the company's history. He had the careful telephone manner of someone who delivered complicated news. Often enough that he'd found the exact right pace for it. Not so slow, it felt like a setup. Not so fast, it felt dismissive. He told me that a vendor payment rerouting request had been submitted through the business banking portal the previous afternoon. The request attempted to redirect a scheduled installment payment, $340,000, to a holding company registered in Nevada. He'd caught it through the standard fraud flag system, which had flagged the destination account as having no prior transaction history with B&D Roofing. He'd placed a hold on the routing change, pending my verification. I asked for the name of the holding company, Dade Holdings, LLC. I asked for the registered address. Suite address in Reno, Nevada, shell entity, no operational presence. I told him to freeze the entire project account immediately. No transactions in or out. And he told me the hold was already in place from that morning. I hung up and sat in my truck at the gas station, 2 blocks from our house, engine running, heat on, because November in Texas still gets cold at night, and I worked through the architecture of it slowly. Zoe had access to the business banking portal. Her username was listed as a secondary signatory on the Riverside Commons account. She'd suggested the arrangement 18 months earlier. Easier for me to move project funds when you're on site, she'd said. You can't always step away from a job to handle invoices. It made sense then. It made complete sense. I'd added her name without reading much past the first page of the form, because that's what trust looks like in practice. You stop auditing the people you love. Zoe knew the login credentials, the security questions, the routing numbers. She knew every financial detail of the Riverside Commons project because she'd been managing the books on it since day one. And Forrest Dade had a holding company, whose name contained his own. I called my sister Willa from that gas station parking lot. She teaches middle school math in Austin, which means she has the specific kind of patience for impossible situations that you only develop by working with 12-year-olds for 7 years straight. She answered on the second ring. I told her everything, the GPS, the apartment complex, the bank, the holding company, the name. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Bram, there's something I need to tell you. I've been trying to figure out how to bring it up for 6 months, and I kept talking myself out of it. because I didn't think it meant anything. I convinced myself I was reading into it. I waited. Forrest called me in April, out of nowhere. We haven't talked one-on-one in probably 2 years. So it was a little strange, but I figured he was just checking in. We talked for maybe 15 minutes. Normal stuff. And then, at the very end, almost like an afterthought, he asked me if you'd updated your life insurance policy, since the company expanded. He made it sound like he was thinking about succession planning for the business, like he was just being responsible and thorough. She stopped. Bram, I am genuinely sorry. I should have mentioned it the moment it happened. I told her it wasn't her fault. I meant that completely. You don't call your business partner's sister with a question like that. Unless you've already built a story that makes it sound unremarkable. Because someone smart enough to construct this plan is smart enough to know that an unexplained question gets mentioned immediately. He'd given it a cover. A good one. The kind you have to admire, briefly and bitterly, before you understand what it was for. My life insurance policy was $900,000. Zoe listed as sole beneficiary. I'd set it up the year we got married and hadn't thought about it since. It's the kind of document that feels permanent. One of the foundational things you sign once and don't revisit, because why would you need to? Because you trust the person whose name is on it. Forrest had visited the Riverside Commons job site 3 weeks before the bank call. He'd brought coffee, stayed for an hour, walked the upper floors with me. On the way back down he'd said, casually, that high-rise construction made him nervous. 16 floors of active scaffolding, open edges. The kind of environment where a misstep carries serious consequences. He'd said, I should be more careful than I thought I needed to be. Said it, with the complete sincerity of someone who cared deeply about whether I came home. I stood in that gas station parking lot in the dark and felt the full shape of it settle into place. The way a large structure becomes visible, all at once when the fog finally clears. Already there, already complete, just waiting for me to see it. This was not a financial scheme with a side relationship. The relationship and the financial scheme were both instruments of the same plan, running in parallel, offering 2 exits depending on what became necessary. Option 1. Redirect the project account funds before I noticed. Option 2 required a different kind of resolution. The specific, irreversible kind that activates a beneficiary designation. I wasn't being robbed. I was being planned around, accounted for, and then removed from the calculation. I went home, ate something I don't remember, lay next to Zoe, and watched the ceiling until 4 in the morning, listening to her breathe the easy breath of someone with a clear conscience, or a very well-practiced one. I still don't know which. I'm not sure it matters anymore. The next Thursday, she left at 10:18 p.m., told me she was going for a drive, needed air. I said okay, get some. 8 minutes later I was in my own truck, tracking the blue dot on my phone, lights off until the main road. I parked in the Ventana at Stone Oak guest lot with a clean sightline to Forrest's first-floor corner unit and recorded continuously from my phone in my jacket pocket. Texas is a one-party consent state. I was sitting in a public parking lot. I was not confused about what I was doing or why it was clean. 20 minutes after Zoe arrived, they moved into the kitchen. The unit was a corner apartment, and the kitchen faced the lot. The horizontal blinds were partially open. Forrest had a laptop on the table. Zoe had a folder of printed pages, B&D roofing project letterhead, clearly visible at 15 feet, to someone who'd stared at that letterhead for 8 years. They talked for a long time, with their heads close together. The specific body language of 2 people working through something that requires concentration and agreement. At some point, Forrest turned the laptop to face her, and she looked at the screen and nodded. Twice, quick, confirmed. The body language of finality. Decision made. Then she reached across and covered his hand with hers, and he looked at her with an expression I recognized, even across a parking lot in November dark. It was the expression of someone who has been with another person long enough that the gesture doesn't require explanation. I drove home. I don't remember much of the drive. I remember my hands on the wheel and the city lights moving past, and the particular texture of silence inside a truck cab when nothing in you is quiet. The best man speech ran in my head, which I didn't choose. You don't choose what surfaces in those hours. Forrest at the front of the reception hall, a little nervous, which had surprised everyone because Forrest was rarely nervous about anything, saying that he'd known me since we were 18 and had never once seen me fail, someone who trusted him. Saying Zoe was getting the best version of a man he'd ever known, saying it directly to her, not to the room, in the way that makes something feel true rather than performed. I tried to find the seam, the exact moment where the real friendship had converted into something else. I couldn't locate it. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the most effective betrayals are the ones that build themselves on a genuine foundation. Because then there's no clean break to find. The thing underneath was real. The structure built on top of it used that reality as load-bearing material. I went to the San Antonio Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit on Monday morning. Detective Yoon had been in financial crimes for 11 years and listened to my full account without writing a single thing down, which I later understood was the technique. She was tracking for inconsistencies, and she didn't find any. I finished. She asked 3 precise questions about the timeline of the holding company formation relative to the date Zoe had been added to the project account. Then she reviewed the GPS logs, the bank documentation, the Nevada Secretary of State filing I'd pulled myself, the parking lot recording, and the life insurance policy alongside its most recent modification date. 8 months earlier, the same month, Forrest had called my sister. She looked at me and said, "Mr. Sinclair, you did this correctly. You documented everything. You preserved the account, and you came here before making any confrontations." That last part matters more than people realize. Most people confront first and destroy their own case before they even know there is one. She told me to maintain completely normal behavior at home and at work. She'd contact me when they were ready to move. Don't change anything. Don't signal anything. Don't give either of them a reason to accelerate their timeline. I lived that normal for 6 days. Job sites, evening dinners, walking Carver around the neighborhood in the dark. Zoe made a chicken dish I like on Wednesday night, and we watched something on television. And she sat close to me on the couch, with her feet tucked under the blanket. I sat next to her, and was, on the outside, completely fine. It was the most exhausting performance of my life. Not the holding together part, the sitting next to Sumyeon part. The not saying it part, because the detective had said to wait. And the detective was right. They came for Zoe, on a Thursday. 2 plainclothes officers, mid-morning, while I was on site at Riverside Commons. She called me from the back of the patrol car. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. I didn't listen to it for 2 days, and when I finally did, I still don't know what I was expecting her to say. She didn't say anything I hadn't already thought through. Forrest was arrested the same afternoon at his apartment. He called me from the holding facility that evening. I answered that one. He said my name, long pause, then, "I'm sorry." I said, "I know." The call lasted 11 seconds total. I've thought about those 11 seconds more times than I expected to, and come to fewer conclusions than I expected. I believed he was sorry in that moment. I also know that sorry, delivered 48 hours after an arrest, is not a reckoning. It's just the sound a person makes when the architecture they built has finally come down around them, and there's nothing left to maintain. Zoe accepted a plea to wire fraud conspiracy. 3.5 years. Forrest's charges included fraud conspiracy and additional counts related to the insurance investigation. The DA's office treated the life insurance inquiry and the job site visit as evidence of intent that elevated his exposure significantly. His attorney negotiated 5 years. Dade Holdings LLC was dissolved by court order. The Riverside Commons project account was fully released in my name, singular, sole, signatory, the way it should have been arranged from the beginning. I finished the Riverside Commons project the following August, on schedule, under budget by a margin I was proud of. I hired a new office manager, changed the business name, kept my initial, dropped his, B&D became Sinclair Commercial Roofing. If you drive by the Riverside Commons building now, you'd see 16 floors in clean condition, new roofing, no indication of anything except work done correctly. The building doesn't know anything happened. Buildings never do. They just stand there, useful and indifferent, and let people project whatever they need to onto their surfaces. Willa drove down from Austin the weekend after the arrests. We sat on my back porch until nearly midnight with bad coffee. And she said the thing that kept getting to her was how normal his call had sounded. How he'd asked about the insurance policy, like it was a logistics question. How thoroughly he'd built the framework of ordinary concern around something that wasn't ordinary at all. I told her that was the method. Make everything sound like what it isn't, consistently enough, for long enough, that the sound of normal becomes the sound of you. Do it with someone's oldest friend. Do it while standing next to them on a job site, telling them to be careful. Do it looking directly at them, because the directness is part of it. It's harder to suspect something you can look directly at. I read every document now, every contract, every policy, every amendment, every form that has my signature or my company's name on it. I know exactly what my accounts hold and exactly whose name is on them. I know my insurance coverage the way I know the layout of an active job site, because inattention in either place has consequences you can't take back. I don't think that's a different version of who I am. It's the same person, just with better information. I trusted completely because I loved what I was trusting. I don't believe that was the mistake. The adjustment is understanding that love and verification aren't opposites. You can believe in someone and still read the contract all the way through. That's not suspicion. That's just attention. The kind you owe yourself. Carver still takes up 3/4 of the couch. The coffee is still mediocre. The house is quieter than it used to be, which is something I'm still adjusting to, in the specific slow way that real adjustments actually happen. Not all at once, not cleanly, but in increments small enough that most days you don't notice the progress until you look back and realize how far you've come from the worst of it. Some nights I sit in the Riverside Commons parking lot, after the building empties out, and watch the lights come on across 16 floors. One by one, the way a building fills itself with purpose at the end of the day. I think about the morning. Forrest stood on the 14th floor next to me and told me those open edges made him nervous. Think about the exact tone of it. Think about how well it matched every other time he'd ever expressed concern for me, how seamlessly it fit into 12 years of evidence that he was someone worth trusting. I loved that friendship. I think parts of it were real. The file doesn't lie about the years before it stopped being what it appeared to be, and deleting it wouldn't make those years not have happened. What you choose to do with the real things that got built on top of is its own question, and one I'm still answering. But I finished the building, and the building is good. That turns out to be enough.